And they were like, what in the world is this? And he's like, that's Elvis's jet. And they're like, no, it's not. And he's like, yeah, you want to take a look inside? So they looked inside and they're like, that's awesome. A fan of the show sent me a video of Mecum auctioning off this abandoned jet that Elvis Presley owned. My channel being abandoned airplanes, I was like, wait, Elvis Presley owned, and it's an abandoned airplane, and it's out in the desert, and it's set for a really long time, and it's coming up for sale. That is the perfect marriage of worlds colliding. It's a 1962 Lockheed Jetstar. So it's the sister to the Hound Dog 2 that is currently at Memphis at the Graceland Museum. Looked at it, first thing is, will it ever fly? No. Half a second, you can tell this thing's never going to fly again. So then what in the world do you do with it? The second option was to make it a static display. Well, there's already two of those at Graceland, and this one's kind of the redheaded stepchild of the Elvis Jets and has a little bit of potentially kind of clandestine backstory that I'm finding out more and more, which we can get into that a little bit later, which is still really interesting. It didn't make sense to make it a static display. It just financially, there's no way to spend that much money to transport it, to set it up, and how would you ever get your money back out of it? That was not going to work. Then the only other option is to make it mobile. Well, we could put it on a trailer. That would be easy, but we could do better than that. And I've seen it done at least one time before. There's a DC-3 up in Michigan somewhere that the guy turned into a road-going, airplane, truck, car, RV thing. So I called him, and I was able to track down his information. I called him. His name's Gino, fantastic guy. And I just said, hey, I'm thinking about putting this airplane on a chassis. I saw that you did it. Tell me your story. How did you do it? I was surprised. He said he was able to get his on and took it for his first drives in less than 90 days. So I'm like, all right, clearly that's not that insanely difficult. I also found out he was going to do a Lockheed Jetstar as his first jet to do instead of the DC-3 that he ended up with. But he only ended up with that one because he ended up getting it for free and the other airplane didn't work out. So I was like, well, that works out really well. The best estimate I could, I actually never measured the thing before I bought it. I was really just hoping that it was not wider than the highway codes and things and taller. But everything I could tell, it fit within that spec that we needed it to. So I thought, okay, so we can make this thing a road-going RV kind of deal. And the interior in this is the whole reason I bought the airplane. All the pictures, all the video, everything was showing that this interior was in immaculate condition. The last time that airplane flew was 1983. So it had been roughly 41 years out in the desert on the ground, and this interior was still perfect condition. So there was only one thing left to do, and that was to figure out how to pay for it and to make it happen. There's several companies that cut airplanes up into parts and sell the pieces for art and things like that. So I knew that one thing we'd never be able to use would be the wings. So I took the wings, cut them into smaller pieces, and that's how we're going to sell them. So I did one math equation that was 3,000 times 300. My research for Elvis memorabilia shows me that the cheapest airplane anything related to Elvis was $1,100. And the other memorabilia pieces, ticket stubs and things like that, anything that he himself owned, was well north of $300. So I figured, all right, we'll go on the low end of $300 that I could sell these things for. And I estimate that I can cut at least 3,000 of these out of it. So that equation equaled $900,000. That was my working budget. So I cut it in half. I've had other businesses and other projects, and you always take what you think you'll get, cut that in half, what you think it's going to cost, and double it. And if it still makes sense, then it's green light, go. That was the math I did. So my budget was roughly $400,000 is what I was willing to spend on this thing all in when everything was said and done. I also knew that it would take roughly $100,000 to convert everything, to get it from New Mexico all the way back to Florida, to pay for all of the expenses involved with labor and sheet metals and parts and all the other random stuff that we would need. So that meant $300,000 was my my max that I could go on this thing. Well, I didn't have 300,000 bucks. So all the money I had in the world that I could scrounge up was about 200,000, but I was already working 2 other deals for other airplanes to buy at the time. So realistically, I only really had about 100,000 that I could make for this deal. I started doing some research on this airplane. It had sold and traded hands probably 5 or 6 times since '83 when the last guy owned it flew it. I also knew that it had been up for auction at least twice in the last 5 years and never even got a single bid, and the opening bids were $100,000. So I thought, I might be able to get this thing for 100 grand or less, because who in their right mind is nuts and dumb enough to buy an abandoned airplane out in the middle of nowhere that's been sitting forever for that much money? If it wasn't Elvis's, the plane literally would be worthless. Not a single penny. Maybe 10 grand just because you can cut the windows out and like wall hang and maybe make some art out of it, but beyond that it's worthless. Except for we have the bill of sale and all the ownership documents where Elvis Presley personally owned it. And it's in his name, and we have Vernon's signature and his stuff all over all the documents. So we have a lot of proof. I decided to register to bid on this, and I knew also from my research that they had a reserve on it of about 300,000. I also knew I'm probably the only serious person in the world that would be willing to spend that much. And I had read all the comments in the other videos about it, and my plan of making this thing a road-going vehicle to share it with the rest of the world, to preserve that part of it, and to cut up some of the other pieces to sell those, to pay for it all. Nobody in any of the comments had ever put those things together to be able to do that. So I knew that financially, I might be the only one out there with this idea. Anyway, registered a bid on it. I go out there, I talk to the finance guy because I just really want them to know I'm a serious bidder, so that when it does not sell, they know that they have serious money that they can close the deal on. Because this is a high profile ticket item that they're trying to move. So they need to be the auction house that sells it. They win because they sell it. I win because I get this thing for a price closer to, close to what I want it for. And the seller wins because they get it sold. So that was my mindset. Priscilla Presley was there. We were standing probably no more than 5 feet away from each other for most of the time. Never once did it cross my mind to say hi. So I was so just, my brain was thinking like, okay, the math has got to work. I've got to, put on the auction show and wait for the bid and then jump in and go, hey, blah, blah, and do all the things, and it bids up and then we let it settle for a minute because there's a little bit of showmanship with the auction stuff. So we need to make sure to go through that process. And then I need to make darn sure that I stick to my numbers and my guns, or else I may really end up upside down and not be able to close on this thing. It comes up for auction. They do the whole bit. They start bidding out, and I throw the first bid at 50 grand just to get things rolling. And then I didn't even get the 50 grand to my, ring guy, that somebody was already like 150. I'm like, well, that went fast. So then at 150, and I threw in, I'm like, all right, 160. And then there's a phone bidder, somebody on the phone. And I just 2 days ago met like the representative for the guy on the other end of the phone. So it was a real person, because the whole time I thought it was a phantom bidder. I thought it was a fake bidder. So I found out it was actually a real person. And I didn't find that out until 3 days ago. 18 months ago, however, I was standing there, it's bidding going up and up and up. And yeah, the reserve is still on, so they haven't lifted the reserve yet. So I knew I was still kind of safe to play with it. So I made sure I wasn't going to be the high bidder when they lift the reserve. So it goes up 150, 175, and I go 200, and they're like 2 and then 210. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This isn't okay. So then I'm doing math in my head, and I knew 250 was, all rules are off. They can sell it at 250 because of all the fees they got to pay out and everything else. So I'm like, under no circumstances can I go over that, or else I might get stuck with this thing. So then 220, I think. And at this point, I'm already out, way out. But I'm like, you know what? Let's play the game a little bit. Let's see where they're going to take this. So I just go 230. I didn't have $230,000. I mean, I probably could have sold everything else and came up with it, but I definitely did not have it. Then the guy behind me, they went 260, and I'm like, yeah, I am definitely out. And then at 260, they said, reserve is off. And I went, out. Not a chance I'm touching this. So they close it, bang, it sells for 260 on the auction block. At the moment, I am both relieved and sad and frustrated all at the same time. I'm relieved because I didn't have to go spend every penny that I've ever seen in my entire life on this thing. I'm mad because I lost the auction. Well, then about an hour later, I get a call from Mecum Auction. Like, hey, this is so-and-so at Mecum Auction. The winning bidder, I guess there was some miscommunication, and he didn't say the 260. He really said this. And I said, all right, I'm sorry. That's a bummer. How can I help you? And they said, we know that you were the number 2 bidder on this. So are you able to close a deal? I'm like, well, I can. I only have $100,000. That's all the money I have that I was willing to do because I've got some other stuff going. But I did say to them, I said, we could work something out if we can work out some sort of financing or something that's reasonable for both of us. Yeah, we can do it. So then he hangs up. That was like a manager guy. And then Mr. Meekum himself, the older gentleman, he calls me and he says, hey, the deal with that, the other buyer is backing out, trying to renegotiate and do all the stuff. And we have to cut a check for $234 to the seller. And he says, can you do it? I said, well, I'd love to. I have $100,000 because I've got these other 2 deals going. I can give you the $100,000, but you'll have to carry the rest for a year. And he said, done. So I hang up the phone, sign the thing, get the wire, send it to lock it in and lock that thing in. Getting it from the desert, you literally just take a concrete saw and you cut the wings off so that it will fit the DOT width on a trailer. And then you take that same saw and cut the tail section off, the cone part, so the length part will be what you need it to be. And then you take a crane and you go whoop, bloop, and stick it on a trailer, strap it all down, and drive it. And then you unload it in reverse order. So it came on 2 different loads. The first load was the guys who cut it up and did their work to it. And then the second was Tim Gentry. He's another influencer truck driver guy that does a lot of boats and just weird stuff. He hauls weird stuff. So I was like, I got a weird one for you, buddy. And he got stopped by the state patrol because this, even as still being all ugly and dilapidated on the outside, but the interior is still really nice. He was driving it, and there was a car in the lane, and he couldn't get over into the weigh station, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So he couldn't get over. Well, he ended up going past the weigh station, and of course, those guys were on him real quick, and they were like, what in the world is this? And he's like, that's Elvis's jet. And they're like, no, it's not. And he's like, yeah, you want to take a look inside? So they looked inside, and they're like, that's awesome. And then they took him back to the station, and they gave him whatever report thing there is for truckers to get that is like the blue seal of approval, the deepest, biggest inspection. So all he has to do is show this paper to go anywhere he wants, anytime he wants, and not have to deal with anything else. So apparently Elvis still has some pull within the law enforcement community.
When you get a ticket, it might look something like this, but the first thing that you need to do is take a picture of that ticket and send it to 305-305. That will get the ticket clinic on your case immediately. They've got brick and mortar offices in Georgia, Florida, and California, but they can help you find a ticket no matter where you get it in the United States by helping you find a local attorney that will do everything they can to help you avoid costly fines, insurance premium increases, points on your license, risk of suspension, even jail time. They've helped me out with this ticket and many others, and a lot of my friends as well. So check them out now at the link in the description below, or again, text your ticket to 305-305 to get the ticket clinic on your case. They are the perfect partner in your fight against any speeding ticket.